So again, just directly contrasting those colors that I use on the left side in shadow with what I use on the right. And you just get into a little rhythm of that as you work. You've got your shadow side palette, and you've got the colors that you use in the brightest areas, and just get into the habit of reaching for those shadow colors anytime you dip out of the sunlight. So don't dare let any of your brightest colors into those shadow areas. And you can see that some of my black areas have gone a little bit dusty. So in some of those really dark creases on his head, just always coming back in and darkening those areas down again. And just being careful with the black further on up the forehead then. You can also see that there's a bit of light hitting the top of the head here. And for places like that, I can just see some blue reflection on the black areas. So I just want to break up the black with some blue at the top. That's probably the reflection of the blue sky, just off the shine of his dark bits. But then really go in for the black areas where I can see them. And just paying particular attention to the photo reference as I do that, as I'd like to get the pattern up his head reasonably accurate. And this would be similar if you were working on a wildlife piece, a tiger for example, something else with complicated stripes. Very similar sort of challenge to a tiger. So just really trying to aim my marks a little bit more accurately, get some of these lighter colours in between the stripes. And now that I've got a few layers of pastel on the paper, it gets a little bit easier to angle your marks and to make them go on the paper a little bit more controlled. That's difficult in the beginning because you're kind of working against the slightly rough grain of the paper. So it's really only when you've filled that grain a little bit with some soft pastel that you'll feel the marks start to go on a little bit nicer. And that's really when it's important in your top layers and you want to get your nice details, your nice mark making. So pretty soon I am going to zoom in a bit and work on the eyes. We've got just about enough done around the top here. Still a bit of work to do on the top to refine all of this, but I at least have all the right colours starting to build up. So I'll just get a little bit of the bridge of the nose blocked in, and then we'll tackle the eyes. Again, this side of the nose really dark, and a really nice sweep around the nose into the lighter colours. And really the smallest dots that I can make, that's what I'm trying for here. Just finding little edges on the pastels. And then coming up a tone with my lighter BE. And really on this scale, it's impossible for me to make absolutely every single little hair that I can see. But I'm trying to make those marks as small as possible. Scatter them in quite randomly so that maybe at a distance our eyes will see more detail. So definitely one of the trickiest parts on the whole face, I think, is on this bridge of the nose. So many different directions of fur. So try your best to follow the flow of it, how those little areas meet. And how they start to flow up in between his eyes. Such a complicated little area. and again rubbing in the direction that I want the direction of fur to appear. Seems to help. And then of course I can help the effect that I'm trying to create there, again with some pastel pencil. It's always easier to come back in with some dark pastel pencil. I find that the light colours struggle to go on, so a lot of the time I'm putting down the light colours with the soft pastels and then using the darker pastel pencils to come in and add extra texture again. A bit of lighter grey pastel pencil over the top here just to accent some of it, but again keeping those colours nice and cool in the shadows. So yeah, I think I'll start to work a little bit on the eyes now. I've got enough of the top of the head in place that once I get the eyes in and I can get the rest of the face blocked in, then I can really start to tweak everything overall. So like with most cat's eyes, there's so much going on here. Lots of detail in my photo reference. My main concern is just getting the likeness, getting his expression right. So I'm not worried about getting every little mark on his eyeball in there. If I was working bigger, then it would be really nice to spend time and go into huge detail on each eyeball. But it's not really that scale of a portrait, so I'm going to try and be a bit quicker about it. And of course I need to pick up a few extra colours from my palette for this part of the portrait. I need a few greens, so I will use much more vibrant greens on the other side, but for this one, really dark in the shadows in here. Just start by blocking in. And don't forget that I've added the colour list at the start of this so you can see all of the colours that I've chosen to use here. Just getting that blocked in initially. Coming in with some quite vibrant green here because all of that's going to dull down significantly as I start to blend and add the other layers on top. And there's also a lot of warmth in the center of the eye. You can see it on the other eye too. So just adding a little bit of brown to the center of the eye. But of course we can't even really clearly see the top of this eyeball. We're so in the shadows here. So you can always put a little bit less detail in on the shadow side. In the eyes, just the same as with the fur. You can't see just as much detail over there. And of course the reflection on this eye also needs to be more muted. Again, just putting that down with the bigger stick, and then I can shape it a little better. So making use of a lot of pastel pencil in this area. Not leaning too heavily here, just accenting the outline of the highlight. And there is just a little bit to the right side of the highlight that's catching more light here. But you can see how you really need your surrounding darks to be nice and dark for that subtle highlight to show up. If your highlights aren't showing up well for you, the most likely reason is that your darks aren't dark enough. So I've also got a little bit of green pastel pencil just to help me with some of these tiny little areas. Just trying to get a hint of this lovely wavy line that goes around on the eyeball. It's like a little snake has got loose in there. But it is very small work on this scale, so it's tricky. And you can start to add a bit more texture perhaps to the rest of the eyeball. I'm going to leave it really minimal. Move on to the other eye, because in the other eye I can add a bit more detail. So with this one I'm not going to go crazy, so I'm going to get this very narrow little pupil in. It's usually close to last when I add that. But of course on a cat's eye it's pretty important that I get them both looking correct together. So I'm going to move on to the other eye and then I can work both together. It helps to get both sunlit and shadow side in, so that you can judge how much darker or how much lighter you might need to go in certain areas. So again, just firming up the outline. And then you can see that part of the iris is in shadow just around the edges. So I'm going to use some of my darker green for that. And I will just get my pupil, a faint hint of it in there again, because I spent a long time positioning these on the eyeballs, so I don't really want to lose its place. But the overall colour of this eye is quite different to the other side. So I'm going to use a couple of different greens. This one you can see has a lot of yellow content. But I also want to bring in some green with more blue content. Especially around the edges of the shadow area. And then again, we've also got some real warmth coming from the center of the eye here. Just looking at the line that the shadow across the top of the eye makes. And again, using my smaller bits of pastel, trying to find a little edge. So all the time just really studying the photo reference here. I'm looking at it as much as I'm looking at my piece. Looking at all the little angles. I know from previous cat portraits that if you get the eyes wrong at all, I know that's the same in any portrait, dogs, people alike, but cats have such expressive big eyes and it's very difficult to get them just right. And of course some of these little shadows from the top here are being cast by the hair, so a bit like eyelashes. Of course those bits of hair around the eyes are just as important because these bits at the top of the eye here really shape the top of the eye. So I'm just trying to make sure that I have enough darkness in there first. And then add some of those lighter hairs. And of course, before I forget, I should add our squiggly little line that goes around this eye as well. I'm just switching to a warmer brown pencil where you can see this line in much more vibrance on this side. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is about as small as I'm going to go with any detail, but I do love that little pattern around the colourful iris. try and get as good a hint of it in as possible. Really, if I was working on a portrait of a cat for a commission, I'd like to work on it a little bit bigger than this, just because they've got such spectacular eyes and you do want to get as much of the detail in as possible. And again, always strengthening those blacks, especially in around eyes where you want that real deep set contrast. We've got a nice little bit of reflected highlight in here. As always, if you've gone dark enough in other areas, your highlights should really pop. And it's always fun adding highlights. Things tend to come to life more when you add the highlight. And I'm just going to try and aim a bit of this brightest pigment . And it's not really a hard edged reflection, this one, more of a softer edge on it. So we're not too far off. Again, this is another area you really could spend a long time on. Just adding extra little flecks of colour and detail. Endless amounts of detail to be found in these eyes. But I'll get the pupil in the middle here and we'll see what it looks like. And there, it looks like they're barely open. It's in such bright sunlight. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with those. I feel like I've already started to get his likeness here. And if I was really working on getting the likeness exact in a portrait like this, then definitely on a cat especially, I would spend a lot more time on the eyes, just getting each bit of the expression spot on. But I think for the purposes of a demo, we're not too bad. So yeah, that's not too bad for the eyes. Let's speed on and get the rest of the face blocked in and the nose worked. Now that I've kind of got into the rhythm of the piece, it should speed up a little bit. Hardest parts are hopefully done. So yeah, I'm thinking this is probably gonna be more like a 3.5 hour demo. I feel like I'm a lot slower on this than on other things, but I'm always saying to you guys that speed isn't the priority. So I'm kind of setting a bad example by trying to rush. But I also really like trying to do these demos quickly to show you how much you can get done with pastel in quite a short amount of time. It's such a forgiving and versatile medium, and a lot of fun to work with once you find your flow. So the rest of the bottom half of the face, not as dark as the top part, so I didn't block in here with a lot of black initially, especially over on the right side. So now just taking a nice deep warm brown, just adding some of the first layers on the bottom part of the face. And we've also got a little bit of body to consider here as well. I'm going to want to work at least under here, under the chin initially, before tackling the chin, because that's going to sit on top of it. But we'll see how far I get. We'll see if I get much of the body done at all. I'll be happy if I just get the face finished, to be honest. So let's try and work this muzzle area. So I've already dropped in some darker colors here for the holes for the whiskers. And then I want to use my lighter colors to sort of shape those holes a little better. I'm just dropping in a little bit of this warm brown earth. And my lighter brown earth. And again, the little hairs here are so tiny. There's no way I can possibly make marks small enough. So I'm just trying to dot little bits of pigment on. So just roughly trying to surround the areas that I've put the whisker holes. And now when we're dealing with the areas around the mouth here, you just want to bear in mind that some parts of the white areas that you're seeing again are in the shadows. So just taking my additional from the top row of the animal set. And of course on the other side those shadows are even more pronounced. So just even starting in with my grey 8 here. Seems very dark, but I can always lighten it a little bit. And of course always remembering to double check the angles of things. Don't get carried away with making something look furry and lose the shape of it. So it's also an important area for his expression and his character. And again, maybe you want to switch to some brown for some of the markings on this side. You can see they're not quite as dark. But yeah, just keep redefining these markings as I'm building up the fur around them. You might lose them a few times amongst your highlights, but it's very easy to get them back. So again, just trying to smooth everything so that it doesn't look quite so jagged. You don't need to blend very heavily on Pastelmat. Things move around and smudge together quite nicely. So just very light little taps like this. Just really pressing your pigment into the paper. course we've got these lovely bright, probably the whitest area on the cat down this right side. So I'm just going to block in roughly where they go as part of his chin or jowl area. Just trying to get the overall shape of this area correct at the minute. As if it wasn't hard enough that cats have really complicated and difficult eyes, they've also got quite tricky little muzzles on them. It's always tricky just getting the cheeks to look right. And on Mocha in particular, he's got enormous cheeks. A little tiny mouth but big, huge jaws. So that's just what I'm trying to find the shape of at the moment. So just starting to add some of the darker colour below his chin. So starting to get the shape of the bottom of his face now. Going really cool with the grey 8 first, but I will come back in with some of the warmer browns. But even though his chin is white, I know from this photo reference that it can't possibly be painted white. Got to think of the shadow colours. And just darkening down the line of his mouth again. Always just looking at the angles that I've created, making sure I haven't let it go off from my drawing stages. So I was just doing my best to quickly block in the rest of the face, fill in any last gaps. It always feels good when you finally get all of the paper covered and you can start to go around and make smaller adjustments. Nice to finally get everything covered in though. And we're getting close to that point now. So you can hopefully start to see how well using such a deep coloured dusky blue-violet for the highlights on the shadow side, it really starts to make sense now that we've got more of the face done, and you can see how this side contrasts with the other side better now. So it might look funny at the start, but it's all about just trusting those colour choices. If you'd like some further help with colour theory and some of the ideas that I'm talking about, do have a look around on the rest of my YouTube channel here. I've got lots of videos aimed at helping you see colours better. Lots of videos that aren't just pastel related, some of them just aimed at teaching a bit of colour theory that you'll find very useful in your portraiture. So you can see that once you do start to come back in with the pastel pencils, you can really start to refine the marks that you've made already, bit by bit adding more detail to the layers. And in the portrait we're going to have quite a lot of whiskers coming out over this part of the face. So they're going to obscure a lot of the detail over here anyway. So again, just coming in with the black, start to refine some of these dark spots again. And of course they're not just solid little blobs, trying to look at again the direction of the fur that each one of them is making. So this side of the face is starting to take shape now. As I said, the whiskers will actually obscure quite a lot of what's going on over here, so I'm not going to go into too much detail behind that area. So now we'll just get the rest of this side of the face blocked in, and we'll be pretty well on. Just some time left to block in the body perhaps. Show you a few things that I would do to go back through all of this and add more detail or tweak things into place. But once we get the rest blocked in, we won't be too far off. And again, down around this area is a little bit obscured by the whiskers, so I'll not go into too much detail behind that area, partly because it doesn't matter, you're not going to see it too clearly through the whiskers anyway, but also the more detail that you add onto an area where you later plan to add whiskers or something as fine as whiskers, you're going to find it difficult to get those whiskers nice and smooth and make really unbroken marks. So I try to do minimal amount of work on areas where the whiskers are going to go. And then finally on this side, some of the highlight colours. You can see it just gradually build up through the colours, usually putting on those highlight colours last. And you do tend to speed up as you progress in a piece, because you've got the order of things. I now know the order that I need to apply the colours to give the effect of Mocha's colours. So it helps speed you through some of the rest of the portrait. So yeah, we've pretty much reached the bottom of the face at least. And now I can just quickly block in the rest of the body here so that we can have a go finally at the whiskers to finish. So I'll just try and be very quick and loose about it. Most importantly, I want to get that nice line of shadow under his chin, just running across there. And I'm going to paint him with his bare shoulder. So this is because he's had his leg amputated, like I mentioned earlier. So he's still got a little pink shoulder here. Cold weather to have less fur these days, but he's doing very well. If you're working along though, it would be very easy just to continue the fur over to this side of the portrait. It's only a little patch on show. But for me, I don't mind commemorating poor Mocha and him losing his leg with this little portrait. I feel like when I was taking the photos for this, he had such a inquisitive look on his face. Some of the patrons mentioned that they thought he looked like he was really trying to figure things out, and I think that's exactly what he's been doing while I've been trying to figure him out as well. And this look just says a lot, I think. A very determined cat, but also a very beautiful face. And there are just a couple of stripes visible here on his body. I'm going to go into as little detail as possible down on the body, just enough to get some colours blocked in. So I'm kind of glad that I'm not painting his whole body, because tiger stripes are definitely a lot of work. But I'm sure I will attempt a bigger portrait of him at some point. He's definitely worth the effort. So again, just bearing in mind where the shadow line should fall. So the fur down on the body is a little bit longer. That's always a bit quicker to create. You can make longer strokes, cover more space in less time. Short-haired animals, definitely one of the trickiest type. Again, just coming up in the tonal values gradually, but making slightly broader, bigger marks now. And finally we're getting to the point where all of the paper is covered. Just reaching the very bottom corner of the portrait now. And yeah, I don't think I'll have to add too much detail down here. I'll be able to leave it a little bit rougher. Gives the impression that the body is a little bit further away out of focus, as it is in my photo reference. Yeah, so we're very nearly finished now. I'll be able to just put the whiskers on to finish. And if you have been working along, I really hope that you've enjoyed this. If you found it difficult, then welcome to the club, because it has been difficult. I found it very difficult. He's got such a complicated face. I know that I could still go back and spend hours on this. I may well do some more work to it another day. There are so many little areas that I could go and tweak further. But I'm just going to have a look at what I can do now around the chin area and get some of those whiskers in to show you how I do that. Okay, I think I can almost call this done. Just one last thing I want to do really is to further darken over on this side, just in around the mouth area. When I have a good stand back from this and look at the photo reference, it is a little bit darker over on this side of the face in some places. So I especially just want to darken down in under the chin a little bit. But I think just to finish off, I'm going to show you how I would add the whiskers. And it's a little bit of an experiment for me. I've got a couple of different pastel pencils. I'm going to try and do them with the pencils rather than the soft pastels. Quite often I will tackle whiskers initially with the bigger sticks, if I'm working on velour that is. I seem able to get a softer line with the pastel sticks, but I think pastel pencil works so well on the Pastelmat that I'm going to give it a go just with the pencils. So there are lots of other things that I would work on this piece. I've done very little work to the bottom part of the body, although sometimes it's fine to leave it as it is. It can be enough detail. I would probably go back through this and just look at each little area. There's more work that I could do to this side of the face. Each of the stripes really working at all the little edges really. So many different edges where two colours meet. So I could spend a lot more time on this piece, but I'm just trying to get it to a nice finish. And to show, when I show some close-ups at the end, you will see that this is quite rough when you look up close. It's just when you see it from a distance then, as long as you've got your colour values correct, so you've got your shadow tones, it's really that makes it look 3D. If you get your colour values correct, then you will get a 3D appearance, even if you don't go for hyper-realism. So for the whiskers then, I've got two Faber Castels. I'm going to use a lighter grey colour for the whiskers on this side of the face. Obviously in shadow they're not shining bright white. It's a great way to compare the colours from both sides of the face. Just look how bright the whiskers should be on the right side of the face compared to the left. So I'm going to use a light grey. And then where you normally struggle with pastel pencil is to get as bright a mark as you want. So I will try the Faber Castell white, but I've also got a a Caran d'Ache, which was recommended to me by someone else, and I'm going to give that a go for the white. But I've also got a Caran d'Ache, which has been recommended to me as a really good bright white, and it seems to be a little bit softer than these, so that's a good sign if we want to get more pigment on the paper. So let's make a start on the whiskers. First of all, the shadow side, always a little bit easier to go for because you're not trying to get a bright white line. Bright white seems to be the hardest thing to get really. So just start by dragging some of the whisker holes out again. Again, another area that I could spend a lot longer on really. This whole area is pretty rough on the bottom of the face. But you can see when you add the whole thing together and you're really looking at the picture as a whole, everything fits because of the colour values. So it's quite tricky to do this whilst filming because I'm trying to have the camera on the other side of me so that you can see what I'm doing as well. So I'm just taking my time lining myself up. You don't have to do whiskers all in a flurry. And of course it's the more awkward of the sides as well because I'm right-handed, so this way I'm going to be able to make those marks a bit easier. But so far the grey seems to be showing up okay. I'm just really planting it down and then going for it. And you can see that it's dragging some of the darker pigment out as well as it goes. And of course I'm going to go back through this and make sure that all of the roots of the whiskers disappear into the darkness, so they look really stark at the moment. So now I can just drag a little bit of the brown pigment out and try and finish some of the whiskers off a little bit nicer, just joining into my line. And it's good if it drags a little bit of the brown pigment out with it, because it means that my nice whisker will be more visible on the light background colour here. So yeah, I'm going to take some brown and just soften the colour towards the end of the whiskers. You don't want to be able to see the root of these. Each one should disappear into somewhere around a whisker hole. So that's not too bad. We'll add a few just around the chin. And then we're coming around into the sunlight now, so switch over. Again, there's the odd little black whisker here and there. Some of the whiskers seem to start out black and turn white a bit later, so I'm going to see if I can use one of these to change colour part way. So first white that I'm going to try is the Faber Castell, one that I've used a lot, and it's always pretty good for a bright white, but I usually do rely on my soft pastels when I want to get a really bright white. So you can see the good contrast between those and those ones. I'll try one more with the Faber Castell. And it really helps if you get a good sweep at it and you can apply a good firm pressure with the pencil. I've sharpened them all into really nice points. And you don't want to lean too heavily because you might break the pencil or break the lead even. And of course you can fix if something like that happens. I'm hoping it doesn't happen. So here's the Caran d'Ache white. perhaps a little bit more pigment out of this. There's not a big difference that I'm seeing. So I'm really just going for the beginning of the whisker on these. Try and join in with that black one. And then let's see if I can sweep it on out. So this is one that I will do a little bit of tweaking at. You don't always get them perfect each time. So yeah, it would be nice if I could get them a little bit whiter in some parts at least. And I'm pretty sure I could spend some time just tweaking at those a little bit. You want to make them look nice and fluid, of course, like you have made them in one stroke. But don't be afraid to have a go at neatening some up as well. You can work a little bit from the background colours, as I'm going to with this whisker. Just try and take a little bit of it out again and adjust the sweep of it a bit. And if I smudge this a little bit, I should be able to obscure my first line a little bit. In fact, I think I just want to get rid of that one. I'm really not keen on it. So I have given us the opportunity to see how I can disappear one whisker and have another go at it. So I'm just going to come back in with some of the colours around it. This part's quite blurry anyway, not a lot of detail there. And maybe I'll just add a few fresh marks in again. And it's pretty much gone. Maybe just some extra marks. So there's always a way with pastel to fix a mistake or have another go at something, even if it's as drastic as adding a whisker. All is not lost. So I think I want it to join into this bottom whisker. And let's have another go with the Caran d'Ache. So that's a little better this time. I just want that one to go off the paper. So it can be tricky business, and trying to get them nice and fine is always difficult. Not making excuses, but if I was sitting on this side of my painting as a right-handed person, it would be a little bit easier for me to get the sweep of these. So I'm sort of working from an awkward angle. So make sure that you sit at a good angle use. Even if you have to turn the piece around so that you can make the sweeping shapes this direction, whatever works for you. So just finally, now that you've got the channels pretty well grooved out on the paper for the whiskers, you can go back over close to the root and thicken each one up just slightly. So you want them to be getting thinner as they get away from the cat's face. So I'm just going down the first part of each whisker, thickening that up slightly. And you can do the same on the other side with these ones. So I think that's me just about finished. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you've made it this far, then well done, because this felt like a long one to me. So much detail in a cat's face. And I hope that this has been helpful and that you'll be able to apply some of this knowledge to your next cat portrait. So here is lovely Mocha along with his finished portrait. I think he approves. You can see that he's still healing from his amputation. but he's totally normal otherwise. Very lively, lovely cat. I think he approves. So I hope that you like the finished piece and that you've enjoyed working along. If you have, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button here on YouTube. That's a great help to me. And also consider checking me out on Patreon for all my other full-length tutorials. Chewing some food. And until next time, happy pasteling.